Have you ever felt that the more genuine you are with people, the more they distance themselves or reject you? Do you find yourself thinking, why does being real seem to make others uncomfortable? Well, today we're diving deep into one of Freud's most unsettling discoveries about human nature, why authenticity can trigger such powerful, often hidden, negative reactions in others. Before we begin, if you want to understand your mind and explore what Freud uncovered about our deepest psychological patterns, hit subscribe, like this video, and ring that notification bell. Trust me, what we're about to explore will change how you see every social interaction. The authenticity paradox. You know that feeling when you're just being yourself, not trying to impress anyone, not putting on a show, just existing as you naturally are, and suddenly people seem different around you. Maybe they become distant, critical, or even hostile for reasons you can't quite pinpoint. This isn't in your head. Freud discovered something profound about human psychology. Authentic people, those who refuse to constantly perform for social acceptance, can unconsciously trigger deep psychological defenses in others. And today, we're going to understand exactly why this happens. Freud and the social mask, the prison of approval. Let's start with one of Freud's central insights. Human beings live in constant tension between who they really are, what he called the true self, and who they think they need to be to gain love and acceptance, the ego ideal. Think of it this way. Imagine your psyche is a theater. On stage, you have the performer, the version of yourself you present to the world. This performer is carefully crafted, designed to please the audience, to avoid rejection, to maintain social harmony. But backstage, that's where your real self lies, with all your genuine thoughts, uncomfortable truths, and authentic reactions. Most people spend their entire lives as performers, never letting the audience see backstage. They develop what Freud would call a false self, a carefully constructed personality, designed to win approval and avoid abandonment. But here's where it gets interesting. When someone consistently shows up as their authentic self, when they refuse to perform, it creates a psychological crisis for everyone around them. Why real people make others uncomfortable? Freud discovered that authenticity acts like a mirror. When you're genuinely yourself, you unconsciously reflect back to others the parts of themselves they've been hiding, repressing, or denying. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine you're in a work meeting, and instead of nodding along with a terrible idea like everyone else, you calmly express your honest disagreement. You're not being rude or aggressive, you're just being real. But notice what happens. People don't just disagree with your opinion. They seem personally uncomfortable with your willingness to be authentic. Why? Because your authenticity reminds them of their own self-betrayal. Every time they stayed silent when they wanted to speak up, every time they agreed when they disagreed, every time they performed instead of just being, your authenticity makes them unconsciously aware of these moments. This is what Freud called projection. The discomfort they feel about their own inauthenticity gets projected onto you. Suddenly, you're not just someone with a different opinion, you become difficult, negative, or too intense. The unconscious hatred of truth. Here's where Freud's insights get really dark. Authentic people don't just make others uncomfortable, they can trigger what I call unconscious hatred. Think about it this way. When someone has spent years building their identity around being likable, agreeable, and socially acceptable, they've had to repress huge parts of themselves. They push down their anger, their disappointment, their true desires, all in service of being accepted. This repression requires enormous psychological energy. It's like constantly holding a beach ball underwater. It takes effort, and part of you is always aware of what you're suppressing. Now, when they encounter someone who seems to effortlessly express what they've spent years repressing, it creates what Freud called narcissistic injury. Their carefully constructed self-image is threatened. The unconscious message they receive is, if this person can be authentic and survive, what does that say about all my self-betrayal? The result: they don't consciously hate you for being authentic. That would be threatening to their self-image as a nice person. Instead, they find other reasons to dislike you. You become selfish, attention-seeking, or dramatic. This is what I mean by disguised hatred. It's not hatred of you as a person, but hatred of what you represent. The possibility of living without the exhausting performance they've committed to. The danger of emotional transparency. Freud also understood that authentic people often have what we might call emotional transparency. They don't hide their feelings behind layers of social politeness. When they're sad, you can sense it. When they're excited, it's genuine. When they're angry, they express it constructively rather than letting it fester. This transparency is psychologically threatening to people who have learned to disconnect from their own emotions. Here's why. Emotions are information. They tell us about our needs, our boundaries, our values. But many people have learned to ignore or suppress their emotional information because it conflicts with their need to be accepted. When they encounter someone who honors their emotional reality, it creates cognitive dissonance. The authentic person's emotional honesty highlights their own emotional dishonesty. And rather than face this uncomfortable truth about themselves, it's psychologically easier to decide that the authentic person is too emotional or unstable. Modern examples where this plays out today. Let's look at how this dynamic shows up in contemporary life. Social media. Ever notice how authentic posts, the ones where someone shares a genuine struggle or unpopular opinion, often get fewer likes than perfectly curated content? That's not just about algorithms. Authenticity on social media reminds people of their own carefully constructed online personas. Workplace dynamics. The colleague who speaks honestly in meetings, who doesn't engage in office gossip, who sets clear boundaries. They're often labeled as not a team player or difficult to work with. Their authenticity threatens the collective agreement to maintain workplace theater. Friendships. Have you ever had a friend who seemed to pull away when you started being more honest about your life? Not complaining, just being real about your challenges and growth. Their discomfort often stems from feeling like your authenticity is an implicit criticism of their own tendency to present only their highlight reel. Family relationships. This might be the most painful arena when you start living authentically, perhaps setting boundaries, expressing your real opinions, or choosing a path that doesn't match family expectations. The pushback can be intense. Your authenticity threatens the family system that may depend on everyone playing their assigned roles. The psychological cost of being real. Freud was honest about something that self-help culture often ignores: Authenticity has a psychological cost. When you choose to be real, you will lose some relationships. Some people will find you threatening, difficult, or uncomfortable to be around. This creates what Freud recognized as an existential dilemma. Do you choose authenticity and risk rejection, or do you choose acceptance and sacrifice your true self? Most people unconsciously choose acceptance. They develop what psychologists call a false self, a personality designed to win approval. But Freud discovered that this choice comes with its own psychological costs: anxiety, depression, a sense of emptiness, and what he called neurotic symptoms, physical and emotional manifestations of inner conflict. The anxiety comes from constantly monitoring yourself, making sure you're performing correctly. The depression comes from the deep sadness of never being truly known or accepted for who you are. The emptiness comes from living a life that doesn't reflect your authentic desires and values. The Freudian solution, embracing the tension dots. So what would Freud suggest? He wouldn't tell you to just be yourself without acknowledging the complexity of the situation. Instead, he'd help you understand something crucial. The tension between authenticity and acceptance is not a problem to be solved. It's a fundamental part of the human condition to be navigated. Freud's approach would involve several key insights. First, understand the projection. When people react negatively to your authenticity, recognize that their reaction often says more about their own psychological state than about you. Their discomfort is frequently about their own relationship with authenticity, not yours. Second, accept the loss. Some relationships are based on you playing a role rather than being yourself. When you choose authenticity, these relationships will naturally fall away. Freud would say this is not a bug, it's a feature. You're clearing space for relationships based on genuine connection rather than mutual performance. Third, find your authentic tribe. Freud believed that authentic people are drawn to each other. When you stop performing, you become a magnet for others who are also seeking genuine connection. The relationships you build from this place will be more satisfying and sustainable. Fourth, practice self-compassion. The journey toward authenticity isn't about perfect self-expression. It's about gradually learning to honor your inner reality. While navigating social relationships skillfully, there will be mistakes, awkward moments, and learning experiences. Fifth, consider therapy or analysis. Freud believed that understanding your own unconscious patterns, why you develop certain personas, what you're afraid of losing by being authentic, is crucial for making conscious choices about how you want to live. The deeper truth, authenticity, as revolution. Here's what Freud really understood: choosing authenticity in a world that rewards performance is a quiet revolution. Every time you choose to be genuine instead of agreeable, to express your truth instead of what others want to hear, to honor your boundaries instead of avoiding conflict, you're not just living your life differently, you're challenging the entire system of mutual deception that many relationships are built on. This is why authentic people can seem threatening. They're not just living differently, they're proving that another way of being is possible. And that proof can be deeply unsettling to people who have built their entire identity around the belief that performance is necessary for love and acceptance, the courage to be disliked. Let me leave you with this. Freud discovered that the fear of being disliked keeps most people in psychological prison. They sacrifice their authenticity for the illusion of universal acceptance, not realizing that this acceptance is often shallow and conditional. The people who react negatively to your authenticity are often the ones who need your example the most. They're just not ready to face their own potential for genuine living. Your willingness to be real, despite the social cost, gives others permission to consider the same possibility. But here's the most important part. You cannot save others from their own psychological patterns by diminishing your authenticity. The most compassionate thing you can do is model what genuine living looks like, even when it makes others uncomfortable. Remember, being authentic doesn't mean being harsh, inconsiderate, or tactless. It means being honest about your inner reality, while still treating others with respect and kindness. It means choosing truth over performance, genuine connection over shallow approval, and self-respect over universal likability. The pain of being yourself is real, but it's temporary and transformative. The pain of not being yourself is also real, but it's chronic and soul-crushing. Freud would say, choose the pain that leads to growth and genuine connection over the pain that leads to emptiness and disconnection. So what do you think? Does this resonate with your experience? Have you noticed that being more authentic sometimes triggers unexpected reactions in others? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this video helped you understand something about your own relationships or social experiences, please share it with someone who might benefit from these insights. Sometimes understanding the psychology behind social dynamics can be incredibly liberating. What aspect of authenticity would you like me to explore next? The psychology of people-pleasing. How to build relationships based on genuine connection. Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more insights into what Freud discovered about the human mind. Until next time, remember, the world needs your authentic self, even when it seems uncomfortable with it. Your realness is not the problem, it's the solution.